Welcome to my channel, and today's topic is parallel twin engines in cruiser bikes. Why is this topic interesting? I think it's interesting because although it's a pretty old engine design, it's being used in various new types of bikes, for example in the cruiser bikes, which I'll look into here. The parallel twin is not new in the cruiser segment. We have the Honda Rebel 500, the 450, the 250. The 300 was a single-cylinder engine, so that doesn't count. Triumph also has models with a parallel twin engine in the cruiser segment, with the Speedmaster, Thunderbird, America for example, and there are probably more. But in general, most cruisers have been with the V-twin engine design. But let's wind forward to the future. Kawasaki launched its Vulcan S 650 in 2016, and the Honda Rebel 1100 was launched for 2021. In my opinion, the parallel twin engine in the Vulcan S 650 is a bit awkward because you have the twin engine, but it revs up to 9,000 RPM with its 61 horsepower at 7,500 RPM and 67 Newton meters at 6,600 RPM. So in order to feel the peak torque, you really need to rev the engine compared to a traditional V-twin engine. And all this is just fine, if not even perfect, for a naked streets or sports bike. But for a cruiser that is known for its very pleasant torque from the bottom of the rev range, I don't like it. But let's dive into some specifications because I think it explains why I think the Vulcan S650 is awkward. But I also have some examples that might change the game. And making my research on this topic also gave me some new insights, so let's dive in. If we look at the specs of the Vulcan S650 2020, it has a capacity of 649 cc's, bore and strokes 83 times 60 millimeters, the compression ratio 10.8 to 1, and the max power 61 horsepower at 7,500 RPMs with a max torque of 63 Newton meters at 6,600 RPMs. Compared to a same class middleweight cruiser, the XVF 650 Dragstar Classic is a 649cc with bore and stroke of 81 times 63 millimeters with a compression ratio of 9.0 to 1. The max power is 40 horsepower at 6,500 RPMs and max torque at 50.9 Newton meters at 3,000 RPMs. I did test ride the Vulcan S650 back in 2019 while I had my 2010 model Kawasaki VN 900 custom. And I was really eager to find out if the Vulcan S was a new, modern and better bike than my 2010 technology bike. I got so disappointed about the Vulcan S650 that I nearly laughed at it while riding home on my VN 900, and here's why. My VN 900 has a capacity of 903 cc's. Bore and stroke is 88 times 74.2 millimeters, has a compression ratio of 9.5 to 1. It has max power of 50 horsepower at 5,700 RPMs and max torque of 78 Newton meters at 3,700 RPMs. I didn't have the horsepower that the Vulcan S had, hence it would get me on the highway because of the better top speed. But I had the torque, 78 Newton meters already at 3,700 RPM compared to 63 Newton meters at 6,600 RPMs. I could get away from that bike from a red light at any time. The Vulcan felt slow first, but I shifted gears like I was used to already at 3,000, 4,000 RPMs. But then I discovered the RPM meter and found out that it had a red line at 9,500 RPMs, while my VN 900 red lines at 7,500. And I gave it some juice and shifted around 6,000 to 7,000 RPMs, and it felt definitely more alive. But the engine sounded like a sports bike, and that was disappointing. Not what I was looking for. If we look at the 800cc class, we have a KTM 790 Duke from 2018. Capacity is 700 199 cc's with a boring stroke of 88 times 65.7 millimeters and the compression ratio of 12.7 to 1. It has a max horsepower of 105 at 9,000 RPMs and max torque at 87 Newton meters at 8,000 RPMs. Compared to a Harley Iron 883 from 2018, capacity is 883.3 cc's with a boring stroke of 76.2 times 96.8 millimeters, compression ratio 9.0 to 1, max power 51 horsepower at 6,000 RPMs, and max torque at 68 Newton meters at 4,750 RPMs. If we go further even into the 1200cc class, we have a Triumph Speed Twin 1200 from 2019-2020 model. Capacity is 1198 cc's. Boring stroke is 97.6 times 80 millimeters. Compression ratio is 11.0 to 1. Max power is 96 horsepower at 6,750 RPM and 112.5 Newton meters at 4,950 RPMs. Taking the Harley Sportster XLH 1200 from 2019, the capacity is 1,202 cc's. Boring stroke is 88.9 times 96.8 millimeters. The compression ratio is 10.0 to 1. The max power is 67 horsepower at 6,000 RPMs, and the max torque is 99 Newton meters at 3,750 RPM. So if we take a look at the power delivery, it is very different. If we look at the comparison between the Vulcan S 650 and the XVS 650 Dragstar, you can see that the power of the new modern parallel twin is a way better. The torque is a bit better. And if we look at the RPM at the power, you can see that they are almost, peaked out. But if we look at the torque, and here we have the difference, that you really need to get the Vulcan S 650 all the way up, almost to its peak RPM, to feel the torque. Whereas the XVF already delivers its max torque at 3,000 RPMs. In the 800 class, the KTM versus the Iron, it's almost the same picture. Although I think that the KTM delivers pretty much the same, I would say, ratio, but its power, it's just way more than the Iron. So it has 105 horsepower compared to 51, and the torque is 87 compared to 68. But you have to get to 9,000 RPMs to actually get that 105 horsepower, where you can stay at 6,000 on the Iron. And then the torque, you actually get the peak torque at half of the RPMs of the KTM. If we take the 1200cc class, we have the Speed Twin against the Sportster. There's a bit of a difference here, and this is where what I find a bit interesting. So if we take the Sportster against the Speed Twin, we can see that the power, 96 compared to 67 horsepower, and the torque is, I would say, the Sportster has its torque advantages, because delivering 99 Newton meters with 67 horsepower, that's quite amazing. But I think it's even crazier that a parallel twin with 96 horsepower can deliver 112.5 Newton meters at only 4,950 RPMs. So here I think this is what is new to me, because the picture of the 650 class and the 800 class, that was what I felt when I came from my VN 900 onto the Vulcan S 650. There's a massive of difference between where the torque and the power delivery actually is. But when we get into this 1200 class, where we have the speed twin against the Sportster. I think this is pretty new, that you actually, with a speed twin, parallel twin engine, can get very close to the torque specs and even have more power than the V twin engine design. The more power and torque typically has been, I would say, either you have power or you have torque. But this engine design at this CC class, that is what actually is new to me, that you, with the speed twin can get both. So that is quite interesting. With the 2021 Honda Rebel 1100 that has a capacity of 1084 cc's, bore and stroke, compression ratio, it delivers a max power of 85.8 horsepower at 7,000 RPMs, has a max torque of 98 Newton meters at 4,750 RPM. That's really nice. The engine is said to be the model found in 2021 Africa Twin 1100 model, and you can see that it has a bit more horsepower and it has a bit more of torque, but also a bit more of RPMs, and the torque of 104.4 Newton meters is coming first at 6,250 RPM compared to the Honda Rebel that actually gives you the 98 Newton meters at 4,750. So when I compare these specs, it definitely answers one of my questions. Does the parallel twin have the future potential in cruiser segment? I think it does, and I had not seen this coming. But we need to see some more larger displacement bikes from 1100cc and up. If we look at the specs from the 1200 class, there's some V-twin characteristics from the 2021 Honda Rebel 1100 with 98 Newton meters at 4,750 RPMs, and you can still rev it pretty high. And we still have to see where the parallel twin engine can take us with the larger displacement, like 1600 cc and maybe even 1800 cc's. But the parallel twin, where the engine is tuned for more torque than horsepower, like the Rebel 1100 compared to the Africa Twin, we maybe won't ever see these larger displacement parallel twin engines, because of one of the major benefits of the parallel twin engine is that it's very compact, it's cheap to manufacture compared to other engine layouts, and building a large displacement parallel twin might bring that big benefit in danger. Who knows? Only the future can tell. See you soon. I'm out.